It was a quiet night in the middle of autumn, the kind of night where the air outside feels sharp against your skin and every tree seems to groan in the wind. I remember that evening clearly because nothing about it felt threatening at first. My parents were away for the weekend, visiting relatives 2 towns over, and I was left in charge of the house. I was 17 at the time, old enough to think I could handle a couple of nights alone. The house was a 2-story place at the edge of a wooded area. It wasn't completely isolated, but the nearest neighbor was about a 5-minute walk down the road. That distance feels a lot longer when the only sounds outside are the rattling of leaves and the occasional cry of some animal in the dark. I had planned a simple night, watching movies, scrolling on my phone, maybe falling asleep on the couch. But as the hours passed, I realized that being alone in such a quiet place didn't feel as relaxing as I thought. The house creaked more than usual. Every gust of wind outside seemed louder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows pressed against the windows were heavier somehow. It was close to midnight when I first noticed it. I was in the living room, lights dimmed, watching something on Netflix. The glow from the TV cast long, dancing shapes on the walls. I remember reaching for my drink when I caught something at the edge of my vision, a flicker of movement. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the show, maybe a shadow from the screen. But when I turned my head toward the large front window, I froze. There was a man standing outside. His figure was just barely lit by the faint porch light I had left on earlier. He wasn't moving, not at first, just standing there, facing the house, facing me. I blinked, leaned forward, thinking maybe my tired eyes were playing tricks. But no, he was there. A man, tall, with broad shoulders, dressed in dark clothing. His face was obscured by the shadows, but I could make out the glint of his eyes reflecting the light. I remember my body going cold. My heart skipped, then started hammering so hard it felt like it was shaking my ribs. I didn't want to move too suddenly, afraid he'd see I had noticed him. My mind raced. Who is that? Why is he here? The logical part of my brain tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a lost hiker from the woods. Maybe a neighbor stopping by. Maybe someone drunk who had taken the wrong turn. But none of those explanations made sense. Nobody just stands silently outside your house at midnight staring at you. I reached slowly for my phone on the coffee table. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. I wanted to call someone. My parents, the police, anyone. But when I looked back up at the window, he was gone. The space outside the glass was empty again. Just the swaying trees, the shifting shadows, the empty porch. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it. Then maybe I had been so wrapped up in the eerie atmosphere that my mind conjured up a figure. But then I noticed something. The window pane. There was a smudge, a handprint, large, smeared against the glass as though someone had pressed their palm there just seconds ago. My chest tightened. I stood up, heart pounding, and backed away from the window. Every instinct screamed that I wasn't safe, that whoever that man was, he was real, and he was still out there. I went around the house, checking the locks on every door and window, making sure everything was secured. My parents always nagged me to double-check them at night, and for once, I was grateful. The back door was locked. The sliding glass door to the patio was locked. The windows upstairs were shut tight. I tried to calm myself down, convincing myself that maybe he'd just leave. Maybe he was some creep trying to scare me, but once he realized I wasn't opening the door, he'd go away. But that hope didn't last long. About 10 minutes later, I heard it. A scrape. Coming from the kitchen side of the house. It wasn't loud, but in the dead silence of the night it was unmistakable, like the sound of metal against wood. I crept toward the kitchen, every step slow, deliberate, my breathing shallow. My phone was still in my hand, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped dead. The back door handle was shaking. Not violently, not like in horror movies where the whole door rattles, but slowly, steadily, like someone was testing it, checking if it would open. I stood frozen in place, watching as the handle moved just slightly up and down, the faint sound of pressure against the lock filling the room. Then silence. The handle stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. I thought maybe he'd given up. Maybe he was walking away. But then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. I nearly dropped my phone. My whole body felt like it was vibrating with fear. He wasn't leaving. He wanted me to know he was there. I backed away from the door, my brain screaming at me to call the police. My hands fumbled with the phone, dialing 911. The operator answered, and I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady, that someone was trying to break into my house. They told me to stay calm, stay on the line, and that an officer was already on the way. But as I whispered into the phone, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The knock came again, this time from the living room window. He was moving around the house, testing every entrance. I whispered into the phone what was happening, my voice trembling so badly I could barely get the words out. The operator kept telling me to stay calm, but the man wasn't waiting. I ducked down, moving on shaky legs toward the hallway. My instinct was to get upstairs, lock myself in my bedroom, and wait. The stairs creaked under my weight, each sound so loud I was terrified he'd hear it from outside. I made it to my room and locked the door. I crouched beside the bed, still on the phone with the operator, listening to the sounds outside. Footsteps. I could hear them on the gravel around the house, slow, steady, circling. Then another sound. The faint slide of something metallic against the frame of one of the downstairs windows, like he was trying to pry it open. The operator kept telling me the officers were close, but every second felt like an eternity. I pictured this stranger, faceless in the dark, forcing his way inside while I sat helpless, waiting. Then the worst sound of all. Glass shattering. The sound of shattering glass ripped through the silence of the house like a gunshot. I remember jerking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. My breath caught in my throat, and the operator on the line kept asking me, "What's happening? What do you hear?" I couldn't even answer at first. My eyes were fixed on the bedroom door. Every nerve in my body braced for footsteps on the stairs. He was inside. The thought hit me with such force, it felt like my chest was caving in. That faceless figure I had seen at the window, the one who had circled the house, tested every lock. He had finally found his way in. And now nothing separated me from him except a locked bedroom door. The glass had broken downstairs, but I couldn't tell exactly which window. My imagination filled in the blanks, painting horrible pictures of him climbing through, landing softly on my parents' carpet, his shoes leaving dirt on the floor as he crept through the house. I whispered into the phone, "He's inside. He broke the glass. Please, please hurry." The operator's voice remained calm,
telling me officers are almost there, telling me to stay hidden. But her words felt distant, because underneath them I thought I could hear something else. Breathing. At first I thought it was my own, ragged and shallow. But no, this was different, deeper, heavy. It was coming from the hallway outside my room. I clamped my hand over my mouth, trying not to make a sound. My whole body shook uncontrollably. I could picture him standing just beyond the door, listening, waiting. The floorboard creaked. Then another. He was coming up the stairs. I wanted to scream, to bolt for the window and throw myself out if I had to, but my body wouldn't move. It was like my fear had turned me to stone. The only thing I could do was press the phone tighter to my ear and pray that the sirens would arrive before he reached me. The footsteps stopped right outside my room. And then, knock, soft, gentle, on my bedroom door. It was almost worse than if he had just forced it open, that quiet, deliberate knock, as though he wanted me to answer, to acknowledge him, to prove I was inside. I bit down so hard on my hand to stop myself from screaming that I tasted blood. The knock came again. "I know you're in there." The voice was low, gravelly, almost playful, like he was enjoying this, like the terror he was causing was the point. I couldn't respond. My body wouldn't let me. The knob rattled. He twisted it slowly, testing the lock. The door shuddered in its frame as he put pressure against it. I scrambled backwards until my back hit the wall, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "He's at my door," I whispered to the operator, my voice cracking. "He's trying to get in." "Stay calm, stay hidden. Officers are seconds away," she repeated. But her words felt like they were coming from another world, because in that moment, all that existed was me, the thin wooden door, and the man on the other side. Then, suddenly, silence. The knob stopped moving. The voice was gone. I held my breath, waiting, straining my ears. Was he gone? Did he retreat back down the stairs, or was he just standing there, listening? The silence stretched on so long it started to feel like a trap. I almost believed if I moved even an inch, he would hear it. And then, crack! The door frame splintered as something heavy slammed into it. He was trying to break it down. I screamed without meaning to, clutching the phone to my ear as the operator told me to stay calm, that the officers were pulling into the street. The door rattled violently as the man threw his weight against it again and again. Each impact sent a jolt through the walls. The lock held, but I didn't know how much longer it could last. My survival instinct finally kicked in. I crawled toward the window, fumbling with the latch, desperate to find another way out. My shaking hands barely worked, but I forced the window up, the cold night air rushing in. I didn't even hesitate. I shoved the screen out and prepared to climb. That's when I heard it. Sirens. Red and blue lights flashed across the dark trees outside. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the night like a blade. And then, silence from the door. The pounding stopped. I froze, half out the window, waiting. For a moment, the house was eerily quiet again. The only sound my own ragged breathing and the faint hum of the police cars pulling up outside. Then, footsteps, quick, heavy, but not toward me, away. I heard him bolting down the stairs, his shoes pounding against the wood. A door slammed somewhere below. By the time the officers were banging on the front door, the man was gone. The police searched the house top to bottom. They found the broken window in the kitchen, shards of glass scattered across the tile. They found footprints in the dirt outside, circling the house over and over. They found the smudge of a handprint on the living room window, the one that had started it all. But they didn't find him. I had to give my statement, my hands still trembling, my voice barely steady. The officers stayed until morning, but they admitted there wasn't much they could do. Without a clear description, without evidence of who he was, he could be anyone. The scariest part? The man never said anything else, just those 5 words outside my door. I know you're in there. And the truth is, he wasn't wrong. Even now, years later, I can still hear that voice sometimes whispering in my memory. I can still see that shadow at the window, that glint of eyes in the dark. And every time I'm home alone at night, I can't help but check the locks twice. Because somewhere out there, that man is still free. And I know he remembers me too.
Story 2. The Attic Footsteps. It started on an ordinary Tuesday night. I was 19, living in a small rental house just off campus with one roommate, Alex. It wasn't a big place. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a living room, and a narrow attic we never used. The attic had no proper floor, just wooden beams and dusty insulation, so we never bothered going up there except when we first moved in. But that attic would soon become the reason I can't sleep in silence anymore. That night, Alex had gone to his girlfriend's place, leaving me alone in the house. I didn't mind. I had homework to catch up on, and figured I'd stay up late with music in my earbuds. Around midnight, I finally turned everything off, locked up, and went to bed. At first, everything was normal. The quiet hum of the fridge downstairs, the occasional car driving past outside, the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. I was just starting to drift into that half-sleep state when I heard it. Thump. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but then it came again. Thump, thump. The sound was above me, in the attic. My room was directly under that cramped, unused space. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving across the beams.
I froze under the covers, my brain trying to come up with rational explanations. Maybe it was an animal, a raccoon, a stray cat that had gotten in somehow. But the weight of it was too heavy. It sounded like a person. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was tired and my mind was playing tricks. But when I held my breath and listened, the footsteps continued, one after another, pacing. And then they stopped, right above my bed. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would shake the mattress. I reached slowly for my phone on the nightstand, my hands shaking. I typed out a message to Alex. "Hey, are you home?" I waited. No reply. Of course not. He was at his girlfriend's place. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. I tried to convince myself again that it was just an animal. Maybe it had found a way in through a broken vent or loose panel. But then came the sound that shattered that excuse. Breathing. It was faint, muffled by the ceiling between us, but I swear I heard it. A slow, steady exhale, like someone trying not to make noise. I sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone clutched in my hand like a weapon. And then, creak, the sound of weight shifting on the beams.
The police didn't let me back into the attic that night. They said it was a crime scene now, that forensics would need to check fingerprints and DNA. But even as I sat downstairs with two officers asking me questions, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still close. The broken vent had led to the backyard. It was possible, likely, that he had fled into the woods behind the house. But a part of me kept imagining him lurking just out of sight, watching from the tree line, waiting for the police to leave. That night, Alex came home after the officers finished their sweep. He found me pale and shaking on the couch, still clutching my phone like I hadn't let go since dialing 911. I told him everything, every sound, every breath, every detail. He didn't laugh, didn't accuse me of exaggerating. The evidence upstairs was too real. The notebook. The police showed it to us briefly before taking it as evidence. Inside, beyond the line that haunted me, I like watching them sleep, were drawings, crude sketches of the house, floor plans, arrows pointing to our bedrooms, and then in one corner of a page, a sketch of a figure lying in bed. Next to it, in scrawled letters, me. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. The landlord had a locksmith come and reinforce every door and window. He boarded up the broken vent, nailed the attic hatch shut, even installed extra locks we hadn't asked for. But none of it made me feel safe. Because safety isn't about locks. It's about trust in your own home, and mine was gone. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the floorboard sent me bolt upright. Every hum of the fridge sounded like breathing. And worst of all, the silence. Silence meant I could hear the attic in my head again, the slow thump of footsteps pacing above me. Alex tried to play tough, but I could see it in his eyes too. He didn't like being alone in the house anymore. We started keeping the lights on at night, TV running in the background just to drown out the silence. But paranoia has a way of feeding itself. Because one night, 3 days after the break-in,
I woke up at 3 a.m. to something I thought I'd never hear again. Thump. I shot up in bed, frozen. My eyes darted to the ceiling. Thump. Thump. It was faint. Too faint, maybe, to be real. Maybe it was my brain replaying the trauma. But it was there. I swear it was there. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and texted Alex. "Are you awake? Please tell me you hear that." A minute later, my phone buzzed. His reply made my blood run cold. "Yeah, I hear it too." We sat there in silence, in our separate rooms, staring at our ceilings like kids afraid of the boogeyman. Except this wasn't a monster from stories. This had been real, flesh and blood. Someone had been living.
Story 3. The Midnight Basement. I never believed I would be the kind of person who'd end up telling a story like this. You hear about home intrusions on the news, or you see them in movies, and you always think, that could never happen to me. But it did. It happened in the first home I ever rented by myself. A small 2-story house at the end of a quiet street in a town where supposedly nothing bad ever happened. The house wasn't anything special. It was old, probably built in the 1950s, with wood that groaned at the slightest pressure, and wallpaper that peeled around the edges like it had given up years ago. The ceilings were low, the windows single-paned and drafty, and the floorboards had this habit of complaining loudly whenever you stepped on them, no matter how careful you were. But I didn't mind. It was cheap, and it was mine. When I first moved in, I was proud of it. I filled the place with second-hand furniture, thrift store rugs, and whatever posters I had saved from my college dorm. It looked like a mismatched collection of someone else's life, but it was all I could afford. And then there was the basement. The realtor had warned me about it. Not that it was unsafe, just that it was old. The steps were steep and narrow. The air down there always smelled faintly of mildew, and the light bulb that hung from the ceiling barely lit more than a cone of yellow dust. But it was extra storage space, and I was grateful for it. At least, at first. The first signs. I had been living there about 2 weeks when I started noticing small things. The first was noise. At night, as I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, I would sometimes hear a faint creak from somewhere below. Not the kind of creak you get when a house settles in the summer heat. No, this sounded deliberate, like weight shifting slowly on old wood. Then I started noticing things out of place. A chair I could have sworn was angled differently. A coffee mug that wasn't where I remembered leaving it. Once the TV remote vanished for an entire day before I found it in the kitchen cabinet, tucked neatly between bags of rice. I tried to tell myself I was stressed, that I was forgetting things. Moving out on your own is a big adjustment, after all. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "You're not alone here." The night it began. It was a Tuesday. I'd stayed up later than usual, watching some mindless sitcom reruns, anything to drown out the silence of the house. At around midnight, I finally turned everything off and went upstairs to bed. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge downstairs. I lay there in the dark, staring at my phone screen until my eyelids grew heavy. And then I heard it. A door. The sound was unmistakable, the hinges groaning softly, like someone opening it slowly, carefully. I froze.
It wasn't my bedroom door, and it wasn't the front or back entrance either. It was below me, the basement door. I held my breath, every muscle in my body locked tight. The sound went on, dragging out for what felt like minutes, but must have only been seconds. Then came the footsteps, slow, heavy, one after another moving up from the basement. At first I thought it had to be my imagination, the old house shifting.
For the first week after the police left, I pretended I was fine. That was the lie I told my coworkers, my parents over the phone, and even myself when I stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing my teeth at night. But I wasn't fine. Sleep had become impossible. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard it again, those deliberate footsteps on the basement stairs. Sometimes I dreamed of the knock on my door, waking up with sweat pouring down my face, convinced I'd hear it again. Other nights I didn't sleep at all, sitting upright in bed with every light blazing, waiting for a sound. Living in a house that doesn't feel like yours. It's a strange thing to live in a place that feels stolen from you. My name was on the lease. My furniture filled the rooms, but every shadow felt like it belonged to him. Every time I passed the basement door, I felt it watching me, daring me to open it. I started avoiding the first floor altogether at night. I carried bottled water and snacks upstairs, locking myself in my room like a prisoner. I told myself it was temporary, just until the fear went away. But the fear didn't leave. It grew. The neighbors. One afternoon, my neighbor across the street, a middle-aged woman named Marla, approached me as I got out of my car. "You doing okay, honey?" she asked. I tried to smile. "Yeah, fine. Why?" She hesitated, then glanced toward my house. "It's just, I thought I saw someone at your window last night. Tall man. I waved, but he didn't wave back." My stomach dropped. I mumbled something about probably leaving the curtains open, then hurried inside. But the truth is, I hadn't been in that room at all. He had. The night of the closet. 2 nights later, it happened again. I was brushing my teeth when I heard a faint thump upstairs. Not the usual creak of the house. This was sharper, heavier, like something falling. I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, heart thundering. Then slowly, with shaking legs, I made my way upstairs. The sound had come from my bedroom. I stood outside the door, holding my breath. Everything was silent again, the kind of silence that feels too quiet. I turned the knob and stepped inside. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The bed was made, the chair was still against the door, my bag was on the desk. Then I noticed the closet. The door was open, just an inch, but open. I was sure I'd closed it that morning. When I pulled it wide open, I found nothing but hanging clothes and boxes. No intruder, no one inside. But the smell. God, the smell. That same sour, unwashed odor I'd noticed before. And scrawled on the inside of the